This layout was good, but I couldn't stop thinking about what it could become. So I did something a bit obsessive. I've taken the same ride and given it the most ambitious theme I've ever built in Planet Coaster 2. Welcome to Imperium Machina, a steampunk launched coaster where every pipe, piston and path was built to make this ride truly unforgettable. You'll see how I've turned a basic launch coaster and given rise to the next industrial age. So was it all worth the effort, or have I overbuilt something that was already finished? Planet Coaster 2 allows you to create fantastic roller coasters. It allows you to design your layout easily and create a ride that looks pretty stunning. This layout was one of the first that actually felt right to me. It has fast pacing, nice transitions, it had all the bones of a great coaster. Take the top hat for example. It's a fantastic icon on the ride that can be seen from all over the place while still being thrilling to ride it. I mean, you come out of the second launch thundering at, I think it's close 60, 70 miles per hour, and you shoot up this top hat and you can see fantastic views of the park. And you then barrel through the rest of the circuit. You have this fantastic zero-G roll and all sorts of high-G corners. But I stopped before I gave it a character, the kind of identity that makes you remember the ride after you've ridden it. It's not some amusement ride after all. This is set in a theme park. It needs a theme. And because of that, it stuck with me. Because I liked the layout so much, but currently I'm not proud of it. It's just a coaster in a pit, and I want something more. If I was going to turn this ride into something bigger, it needs a theme, something that lets me go over the top while still making sense. And of course, steampunk is perfect. Industrial, theatrical, mechanical, but also grounded. It lets me design everything like it serves a purpose. And it allows me to juggle the constraints that I've got. If I've got this fantastic top hat, then let's make it an absolute statement, the complete icon of the park. So I decided I'm going to put something tall in front of it. I decided to go for 2 steam stack towers. Now, I went for 2 because I did try 1, but when it's 1, it looks a bit weird. It doesn't really draw the eye how I want to. So I went for 2 next to each other and tried to jazz it up a bit, of course. You can't just have 2 big sort of circular pipes, that's not interesting. If I'm going for steampunk, it needs to look the part. So I decided to start adding cogs, and to add more visual intrigue, I did this strange thing in the middle where I've got like a segment that's a bit smaller and then the sort of copper brass work around it, and I think from a distance it looks really cool, and at night it looks fantastic. Now, because I've put the coaster in a pit, I wanted the pit to also have a theme. So clearly I'm going to have to jazz it up with rocks to make it a bit more realistic, but then also I thought the park's probably going to make their own sort of rock work to tie it in with the steampunk theme, and my idea here was that they're going to be a sort of a series of sort of steam tunnels where these pipes are coming out of this giant power station, which is what the steam stacks are, and running around the city sort of in the lower world, I guess, the undercity, and powering all the various buildings and contraptions that are going on in this sort of industrial area. And because of that, it allows me to play with these rocks. Now, these pieces are quite simple. They're just Viking walls. I've been sort of changing the scale up, interlocking them with one another and just slightly rotating them to give a sort of varied look. And then on top of that, I sort of interlace some rocks into it. So what you're looking at here is sort of my first test piece. So I built the stacks. Well, I actually used the stacks previously and then have put them in here, and then built the rocks around it to see how they gel together. And I think currently they're working quite well together. I mean, look at them. I think the contrast between the rock and the brick, where you've got just the random rock and the super organised brickwork, I think is a really nice juxtaposition that I want to continue throughout the design of this ride. I find to create a ride that is special, it requires a sort of change in your thinking and the way you approach sort of designing it. So this wasn't just about decorating a coaster, it's about building a world that needs this coaster. So that's where this sort of story started developing from. I have the steam stacks and these sort of tunnels for the pipework, so obviously I'm going to start theming it around this sort of power plant, and I want it to be this experimental machine. The idea is that this experimental machine is being powered by steam. It launches you around and it's generating the power for the nearby town. I understand, might be a little cliche, but I quite like it. I think it's a simple story to tell and is exactly what this park needs. It allows the coaster to be grounded. It is vital to the existence of the world around it, but also being quite interesting and offering up something different that the park doesn't already have. Following my little sort of test area and proof of concept, I decided I wanted to start with the station and the queue. Not because they're exciting, but because they define how the ride feels before it even launches. My intention is that the station is this sort of repurposed energy chamber. So originally it was this grand warehouse which will have all sort of like cranes and pipes hanging off it, you know, the usual steampunk vibe. But inside is this repurposed energy chamber, which is the experimental machine that is the roller coaster. I faced a bit of a decision with the queue line, because basically I have two choices. I could either take the queue up and over the station and into this plot of land behind the ride, which would work. It gives me a load of room for the queue, I can keep it nice and compact, and can probably put a nice theming element in there to keep it exciting for the people waiting. Or I could do the far more challenging approach, where I go down what would end up being quite a large staircase and take it under the ride, and I think this is by far the better solution. Underneath the ride gives you this fantastic thing to view whilst you're queuing for the ride. Imagine the suspense and the excitement you'll get sort of walking down the stairs into this pit, which will be highly themed with all sorts of rock work and various sort of contraptions scattered throughout the queue. And then above you is the steam machine racing around. You're having the screams, the excitement, and I think the anticipation you'll get from being in this sort of area would be so much better than being sort of tucked behind the building. It also allows the sort of station to look far more grand. When the station's up high in the various other buildings, it makes everything look, well, first off, taller, because compared to you, it is taller, but also it just has this more imposing sort of view from it, and I think that is exactly what it needs for this sort of steampunk, experimental, industrial zone. Obviously, taking it down here is going to be quite the challenge. I've got to make sure that I still have the clearances between the queue and the ride above it, but then also I'm going to have to make sure that because people are standing here for a long time, a real life risk assessment would have to assess what's the likelihood of something coming off a train and hitting someone, and I think they're probably going to err on the side of caution here and go that, yeah, okay, the likelihood should be minimised, so I'll put some kind of netting above, probably just like the chain link fences or something. I'll see how it goes, but I think that is probably the best approach for sort of a safe and realistic looking vibe, because here I'm after realism. Well, I want implied realism. I don't want actual realism, because actual realism takes an incredible amount of time. And whilst yes, it looks cool, it's not really what I'm here for. I'm playing a game at the end of the day, so implied realism is the target. Now this is where I sort of lost the plot, but I'd have to tell you, it wasn't a good way. So I managed to get the queue in, and that's looking fantastic. I finished off the station building, and that's looking fantastic. And then I've also started fleshing out the rock work and the various other things around the ride, and guess what? They're also looking fantastic. Now, with all this fantasticness, there's also a lot of pressure building on me, because I want to make sure that this ride is the best it can possibly be. I've spent all this time upgrading what was already quite a good layout to make a ride that is truly memorable, and to do that I've had to pay attention to all sorts of like realistic details. Now it is quite tempting to go all out here and start spamming buildings everywhere, huge structures, massive ironwork of pipes and things, but I think ultimately it's not particularly realistic. I want to strive for realism, and for that it means that I need to be considerate of the costs of everything and maximum impact and return. So I haven't gone for spamming everything everywhere. Ultimately I'm going to need some green space where there'll be sort of plants and things, and ultimately, because the ride is everywhere, the likelihood of there being a gardener is quite slim, because they would only be able to operate at times when the ride is closed, and gardening at night's not very fun. So I'm going to have it sort of in a bit of an overgrown look, probably not fully overgrown because it is in a pit, so I wouldn't get much light, but I'm probably going to spam it with ivy, and like I've done here with the little bushes and the rocks, I think it's the sort of vibe I'm after. Because I'm striving for realism, there's also a load of little details I wanted to add. So for example, on the launch sections, I wanted to make sure there was a catwalk in the eventuality that the ride gets stuck, say there was a power outage or it's rolled back and come to a stop. I wanted it so you were able to access it. I'm not going to go in and put full accessible routes into this, like with stairs down. I'm just going to put a door on the wall and go, yeah, they get up somehow through here. I also wanted to show off this little wall. This would be called a king post wall, so basically you drive some I-beams into the ground and then you have concrete planks slotted between them and then you just backfill behind it. I thought that would be a good use for keeping some of the land they've dug out the hole, so it can act as sort of like a theming element, but it's also quite a cheap way to get a wall. I'll put decals on it and things. I'll make it clear that it's sort of a bit raggedy, because ultimately they do leak. When water fills up behind them, they'll just seep out through the gaps, which can leave it sort of looking sort of calcite stained. Completely over the top, don't need that kind of realism, but that's what I wanted. I've decided that I'm going to focus on realism that I care about from an engineering perspective, rather than like operations perspective, I guess. I will put all the fencing in, I'll make sure that you can't access the ride area, etc. But I do want it to be more engineeringly realistic rather than operations realistic. Now it also happens at this stage in time, the sci-fi pack is just released, so I thought I'd have a go at trying to merge the sci-fi elements with the brick and pipes that I'd already had going on to see how they merge together, and that created this restaurant, which I sort of like it. I do like the sci-fi element of it, with this large metal work, but I'm not sure about the brick and the actual restaurant bit itself. I'll have to see how I can play with it to make it look a bit better. I've spent a load of time adding some art shapes, because before it's using the Big M, or well, Mac, launched LSM coaster, which is fine, but I had based this off of Taran and Maverick, which are actually LSM? Of course they're LSM. Intamin coasters, which they don't have in the game. They don't have the Intamin Blitz model currently. I'm sure it's coming as a DLC. Fingers crossed. So I've gone out my way to make my own trains. Now I didn't want the new version like Velocicoaster, I wanted the old version like Maverick, so I've based the trains pretty much off of them, and I think they've come out quite well. Realistically, the trains wouldn't be this long. The amount of energy it would take to launch this train would be huge, but I've deemed that the budget for the park's quite high. They could probably afford it. They care quite a lot about capacity, so that's what I've gone with. We're going to have 5 cars of the old train type of the Intamin Blitz, which, in my opinion, are actually looking quite good. I've been adding fences to the queue, because the in-game fences are okay, but it always looks far better if you start doing your own, so that's what I've been adding in, and I think it's looking quite good. I wanted the sort of claustrophobic feel that you're in this sort of undercity, so up top where you've got the bridges and the big plazas is the actual steampunk industrial area, and then down below is where you just have all the clutter, all the gubbins and things that make the city work, and where you've got this experimental steam machine sitting in it. And if you're walking through that, it's probably going to be claustrophobic, it's going to have high fences around you, and I think it's the vibe is coming off quite well. I've also been adding in pipes and the queue covers to make sure that you're not going to be hit by something falling from the train. But obviously, people are still queuing in this. I can't have it so claustrophobic that you just sort of freak out in the queue. So I have tried to vary up the queue covers, make them higher in places so you don't feel trapped in. And in this instance here, I also sort of just attached the netting straight to the track. You do get that on coasters. You probably wouldn't in this bit, but I think it looks quite good. It adds variety and visual interest, and that's really what I'm after here. With the sci-fi update, they added these lovely recolorable rocks. Probably one of the best additions they've actually done so far, and these recolorable rocks have really inspired me to start sort of extending the rock work around. I've really taken inspiration from Nemesis of Dalton Towers in this one, where the Nemesis is sat in this giant pit with exposed rock work, and I want a similar vibe. They would have dug this down, would have hit rock, would have had to have done some blasting and things, and as a result the coaster is now sitting in this sort of jaggedy, rough rock work, combined with a load of buildings that they've added in. So that is why I've gone for this sort of look, and I think it's looking fantastic. But of course, if I've now got this giant drop and rockwork exposed for a coaster, I can't have that just sort of exposed, so I need tall fences to stop people jumping in. I believe the UK standards require that to be 1.8 metres, so I've made sure they're at least that high, and make sure it's wrapped around the entire thing so that no one can get in the ride area and no one can jump into a giant hole. Same as applying for the bridges. I just haven't quite finished this one over here, but the rest of the area, fencing's going in, and I think a variety of fencing is really important. I've been looking at Fantasia Land and Fly to see how they've done it, and the fences are always changing up, so I wanted to make sure that these were also changing up. I've also been developing the area around the plaza, so I didn't want buildings everywhere. Buildings are quite expensive. Also, if I come up here, I don't actually have the space. This is very close to the Viking land and the spinning coaster, so I was just going to put a sort of facade here. This will just be a framework wall, and to be honest, it caps off the area quite nicely. It encloses it, it continues the vibe that I'm after, and guests are none the wiser that it's not an actual deep building. Remember, it's all about being a theme park, so it just needs to appear like it is. It doesn't actually need to be, which is why often I have backs of buildings as just sort of plain white or grey plaster, like this building or the one over here. Exactly the same sort of facade front, fake back. This might be the most complete ride I've ever built. It's not the biggest, it might be the most intense, but it's certainly the most coherent. There's a moment near the launch where the guest path sort of coils beside it, and you're sort of under the ride structure, and you catch this perfect view of this amazing steam machine stacked above you. It was sort of planned. It's been executed far beyond what I ever thought was possible, and you just end up with this view that is just unrivaled. The theming isn't just about aesthetics, it's about earning belief, and I think I have finally pulled that off. Just look at that view. Look how crazy it looks. Just the mess of track and the ironwork structures and the brick. The steam stacks are looking fantastic. And the rock work with the plants, I think it is beautiful. In the words of Nerd Chacho, I am so here for it. I think this is probably one of the best things I've made so far in the game. I think it is edging out the dark ride. Big words, I know, but I do think it is truly fantastic. So there's all sorts of things going on here, and the queue's looking great. We've got the fences are now fully in, and I've finished adding the lighting. This ride is done. This is its finished state. But there's a few things to discuss, and I want to go into them. So one of the key things to making your park feel alive and realistic is path clutter. If you look on Google Earth on pretty much any park, you'll see that the paths are just cluttered with everything all the time. There is so much stuff on the paths, and I believe it's deliberately sort of break up flow and, well, mostly extract money from you. So I've been adding in sort of like these advertising boards. I know there's currently nothing on them. I haven't gone away and created custom media for it. I might get AI to do it at some point, but I've got these custom boards that'd be like advertising rides or seasonal events for the park. But then also, of course, I've got to advertise the food units. So here I've got like the chief beef sign, and this would be like the full-on quick serve food unit. And over here I've even got like the vending machines, because every inch of this park should be monetized. Everything is to extract as much money from my customers as possible. And that's how real theme parks are designed, so I'm trying to embrace that by doing the same sort of thing. But then also, to add immersion, you can add sort of like the crates and things to give it sort of that industrial steampunk vibe. It's sort of Victorian, I guess. I haven't really settled on a time frame or a particular steampunk vibe. There's all sort of like sub-punks, I guess, but I've just gone for sort of industrial and semi-Victorian, I guess, the more conventional, stereotypical. This would probably be themed on some kind of film that came out in the in-universe, but I didn't have time to go and develop a film to then theme a ride on that film, so I just skipped that step and just went for, yeah, it's probably based on a film. Or movie for you American viewers. So over here I've got sort of like, I guess they're not Tesla coils because I don't want it to be an electric based, it's all sort of pneumatic, but there's some kind of tower. They look interesting, and yeah, I just like them. I don't even know what they are. But then round here, I've finished the restaurant off, I've expanded it out a bit. I haven't done interiors, nor is there actually a working restaurant in there. Interiors aren't my thing, never have been. Never did them in Minecraft when I used to make that content. Never did them in Planet Coaster 1, and I'm probably not going to do them here. So that's my little restaurant area. I've also expanded this whole zone out to get some midway games in to extract even more money. Yes, more money from my customers. I realise that the park has a distinct lack of midway games. I do hope they add that as a DLC at some point. Well, probably a free update. with a DLC dropping alongside it, but I do want some midway games. I think that would really be an interesting sort of dynamic to add to your parks. Not that I ever play it with money on, it's nearly always sandbox. But yeah, just be a nice thing to have, I think. But yeah, with this area opened up, you've now got a far more clear sort of entranceway into the land if you're coming from this way. So you walk in and immediately those steam stacks are drawing your eye as the coaster barrels over the top. But then if we move to the other end, we've got this top spin. I haven't actually finished this area off. I'm lacking inspiration for it. I'll probably come back to it at some point and finish off this little area. Maybe in a video, maybe not. At some point I will do a walkthrough of the whole park when it's finished. It will definitely be done for that, but currently not done because something's not vibing right. If you've got any suggestions on how I could improve this, do let me know. I've got to include the toilet block because currently there's not one in the land, so toilets do need to go here, which is what this building is meant to be, but the grey bricks, not doing it for me. It's not working. But at least if you are over here and you're walking through from the Viking land, you are once again met with the steam stacks as your immediate weenie point. Looks great, but then you also get the rock work, and if you cross over this bridge, you get the ride barreling around you, which really is fantastic, and that is exactly what I wanted when I was creating this. I wanted bridges going above, I wanted tunnels for the ride, I just wanted to play with levels and layers all over the place, and I think I have executed that pretty much perfectly for what I envisioned. Now, no ride can be complete without a name, and for a steampunk ride I need a steampunk name, and that is where I've come up with Imperium Machina. It roughly translates to the greatest machine, and I can't think of a better name. I started this project thinking I was going in and just theming a layout, but somewhere along the way I got super invested. This isn't just a Planet Coaster 2 build, it's one of those rides I'll always remember as mine, one of the few that actually feels completely finished. Now, let's be honest with yourself, you've made it this far, you may as well hit subscribe. I've got plenty more content on the way, and way more absurd engineering to fill your time with. Now, I can't delay it anymore, it's time to experience Imperium Machina.